Welcome, y'all, to the Switch for Good podcast. I am Dotsie Bausch, and I am here with the legendary Alexandra Paul. Say something different every time, don't I? They're all true.
You're so sweet. Thank you.
So, Alexandra, we have some parties to invite people to.
Yes.
Right? Which is kind of
and
fun.
You know how vegans party.
I know. We're so crazy. So, coming up very soon, 2 dates for you to remember, folks, February 15th and February 20th. Now, you're welcome to fly in. These are in and around Los Angeles. So if you live in the area close to where we are recording this podcast, which is in Orange County, you are invited to join us at Seabirds, their grand opening, which is a vegan restaurant, entirely plant-based restaurant that is opening in South Coast Plaza. Now, South Coast Plaza is the highest grossing mall in America, so it's pretty exciting to have an all-vegan restaurant in there. And it's also the only high-end, all plant-based restaurant in any mall in America. Right. So it's pretty groundbreaking. Now, they've been open for a few weeks, but they're really celebrating their grand opening. And they love this podcast and they love you. And they called and said, we want to do this and we want all the proceeds to go to Switch for Good. So that's going to be a great party. That's February 15th, which is a Saturday night. And then secondly, February 20th is a launch party for the book Legends of Change, written by Rebecca Frith. And it is a book that is about 80 essays and interviews with different women, specifically, who are change makers in the movement.
Specifically you, which is why you should be called legendary and not I.
No. Nice try. You can't get out of it. But Rebecca is coming all the way from Phuket, is where she lives. So this is her first trip to America. So her first trip ever? Never. No, she's British.
Oh, British.
And so she's never been to America. So we got to show her how vegan Americans party. And this is just going to be a really exciting and wonderful night. It's in Pasadena. And so for that, easiest thing, just email me if you want to come, info@switch4good.org, and just say, hey, want to come to the Legends of Change launch party. We're doing live podcasting that night. It's just going to be loads of fun. Of course, amazing, awesome, yummy vegan food all over. So that one, just send me that email and we'll get you guys in. So that's enough of that. I mean, parties are fun.
Let's talk to another legendary partier.
Exactly. It's so nice transition there. All right. Yes, this is I'm a little on the verklempt side. So this is because I'm just so wowed that he is with us today. We have John Robbins. Mm-hmm. So John, many of you, some of you, most of you will know his background and his story. I will say this. Every single person that I have personally ever met who has been in or around this movement, that has been in it longer than 20 years, all of them started because they read his book, A Diet for a New America. And they're the ones that are the movers and shakers nowadays, right? That all of us look up to and really were the trailblazers. I have not met one person that just said, oh, I just, stumbled upon it myself 25 years ago. It just hit me one day. It's all of them. Oh, it was Diet for New America. So anyway, one of his many books. So John also, quite famously, turned his back on a multi-billion-dollar ice cream empire in exchange for living, is this right, John, in a one-room cabin on $500 a month?
Actually less. First few years was $500 a year.
You were right. Alexandra said that earlier. I'm like, well, that's impossible. So
it is. I said, no, it's fun. They grew their own food.
Money, you can't spend any money. So we were really roughing it. I mean, I grew up in a family where I jokingly say, but it's only partly a joke, that roughing it meant that room service was late. And now we were really roughing it. I mean, we were trying to send our roots down into the earth and live the way people have lived forever, with the earth, with the seasons, without the insulation and isolation that money is often used to buy. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult. It was rough. It was 10 years, and I'm very grateful that we did it. And I'm also grateful that we don't live that way now.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think what most people today would consider, a missed opportunity to miss out on the huge fortune, it has blossomed into a completely, new life many years ago and still living it today, and a career path that embraces health and community and all species, and of course, a plant-based diet. So John Robbins is, I guess I could say, the reluctant heir of the Baskin Robbins ice cream empire, uncomfortable with the ethical implications of dairy on one's health, the animals, and the environment. You forged a new life for yourself in the plant-based space. And now you are a best-selling author of 9 books and also the co-founder of Food Revolution Network with your son, Ocean. So
Yes.
we have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
We're going to dive right in.
So first, John, thank you for being on the show. I've been a fan of, I was one of those people who read the book 25. Came out in 87, didn't it?
Yes.
87? It was really the first book that I remember. Tell me if I'm wrong. At that time, that took put all in one book the ethical reasons to go vegan, environmental reasons, and health reasons.
When I wrote the book, to me, connecting those dots was the important thing. But interestingly enough, one of the publishers that was considering publishing the book had an editor that they asked to review it. And her response was, Mr. Robbins has to make up his mind if is he writing about animal issues or the environment or health.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, that's the whole point, is we're talking about all of them. Because actually, whatever your doorway is, whatever your entrance is, you get led down the same path if you care about what's most ethical or what's most physically healthy for us or what's healthiest for the biosphere and the web of life. You end up with the same food choices. And to me, that is the most spectacular reality, because we don't have to choose, what's good for me or what's good for you, what's good for the earth, what's good for the climate, what's good for the animals. We get to do all of it in the same way. And to me, that is actually the beauty and the power of it.
Right there, exactly. So as we rewind all those years to before you wrote the book, and your, I guess, aha moment where you started to understand the truth and the truth was revealed, what took place in your life? How did you either stumble upon or fervently go after this information when you grew up with an ice cream shaped swimming pool in the back and more ice cream than any kid has ever had the, ability to consume? Like, it was so much. Yeah. Like,
You would have thought it was every kid's dream, but yet you realized when you were still a kid that it wasn't healthy.
I did, because I did have more ice cream than anybody else on the earth probably could eat. We had unlimited. We had a commercial freezer in our home. We had all of the month's 31 flavors that were in the stores in our home, plus experimental flavors. I was involved in developing flavors and inventing new ones. And, it was in some ways a kid's dream. But one day I remember going with my dad to a dairy where Baskin Robbins got a lot of its dairy products. Now, at that time, in all of the stores, all of the retail stores where customers would come in and buy ice cream, behind the counter, up on the wall, there was these very large brown and white sepia-toned photographs of beautiful pictures of Guernsey and Holstein dairy cows grazing in beautiful grasslands and pastures. Those pictures were actually taken in Wisconsin, and the feeling that conveyed from those photos was of closeness to nature, of beauty, of connection to the earth, all things that I valued and appreciated. And I believed that the ice cream was full of calcium and protein and therefore was good for us, because that's what I'd been told. Mm-hmm. And I believed the pictures because that's what I saw. But this particular day, we went to the actual dairy where Baskin Robbins got a great deal of its cream and other dairy products. And it was a real wake-up call for me. The cows were enclosed in a feedlot, and there was not a blade of grass to be seen. They were standing knee-deep in their own excrement. They were really, really crowded. And there was a fence, and there was a trough on the other side of the fence they could stick their head through and eat, and that's what they were doing. And I approached, Now, I was a kid at the time. I maybe was 12, maybe 13, I'm not sure, but I was a kid, and I had only love in my heart for this cow. I thought I might be able to pet it or say hello or greet it or just be friends to it. And I walked towards it very slowly. I didn't want to startle it, but it startled. It jumped. It was afraid of me, a little kid who just had only good energy for it in thought and heart. And I saw that and I thought, what has happened to that animal by human beings? What have human beings done or to that animal? Or what has that animal experienced from human beings that has made it so afraid and anxious and jumpy and afraid of a little boy? And the more I started to ask questions, the more I realized that the photographs on the back of the counter, the back wall behind the counter at Baskin Robbins were lies. They maybe had been true at one time. Obviously, they were photographs of something that took place at a moment. It was there, but that's not where the ice cream was. That's not where the dairy products came from, that the ice cream was made from. And it bothered me. It just bothered me, and the fact that the animals were so unhappy bothered me. And then we were coming up with a slogan that year, advertising slogan, "We make people happy," and it was the center of all the ad campaigns, and it was on billboards and in radio jingles and all that. We make people happy, and I remember saying to my dad, "We don't make people happy. We sell a product that provides momentary pleasure. People like it, short term, but that's not happiness." And he said, "Well, you're being a philosopher. This is just an advertising slogan. Stop taking it so seriously." And I said, "Well, but it's not true." And he said, you're analyzing too much. You're thinking too much. It's our point. We're trying to sell ice cream here, and this is an advertising slogan that will help us do that." I said, "That's right. That's accurate. We sell ice cream. We don't make people happy. We sell a product that people like short term." But he and I just were not on the same page. You can see it. We didn't have the same questions or values or desires or aspirations. And I wanted my life to be of service to people and service to the whole planet, which I felt was endangered by our way of life and by our thinking that we're superior to other animals, by our thinking that we're in control, that other animals only have value insofar as we can convert them into revenue or sell them to eat their flesh or their milk from their bodies or eggs from their body. I just felt really drawn to a different way of life. And it was very difficult to explain that to my dad, who had worked very hard his whole life. He did not grow up wealthy, but he had become exceedingly wealthy. Mm-hmm. And he was proud of that. He felt great about that. He wanted to share that with his only son. And poor guy, he gets the one kid in the country who would say no to that.
As the only 12-year-old ever heard of that it would have that experience and ask those questions at such a young age. Did your dad didn't have that same experience at that dairy, huh? It just seemed like...
Oh, God, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no. To him, it was just like, what do we have to pay? Make the deal, make the arrangements. What's the timeline? What's the quantity delivered at one date, at what date? All that stuff. Business. And the fact that these are animals here who draw breath from the same source as we do, mm-hmm. and who are being mistreated is obvious. You can't, even my dad didn't think, oh, this is glorious. But to him, it's a business, and it's what you do, and it's normal, and it's not to be questioned. Cruelty begets cruelty. I mean, I don't know how you measure it in a test tube. I don't know how you actually can calculate this data, but I do know this, that when an animal lives its life in fear and pain, and its natural urges are thwarted and frustrated, and it's given no ability to live the kind of life it's evolved to live, and it's biologically desiring to live, can't move around, can't exercise, can't form natural bonds with its herd members if it's a cow, then something of that experience is in the milk or the dairy or the cheese or the eggs, whatever animal it might be, whatever food product it might be. that we partake of. There's misery then on our menus if we treat the animals that way. I just think we're too interconnected for that not to be the case. And I didn't want to be any part of it. I didn't want to eat food from animals that have been treated like that. I didn't want to depend. I didn't want to give money to industries that treat animals like that. Factory farming, feedlot, industrial meat and dairy consumption, production has become something that if you see it, you don't have to be a vegetarian, you don't have to be an animal rights activist. If you're just a decent human being that wants to see more love in the world and less pain and cruelty, if you see how these animals are treated, it's appalling. It's deplorable. And again, you don't have to have a highly refined sensitivity because it's so gross. And I think if people knew, they'd say no, and they'd find a better way. And that's what's happening today, increasingly, more and more.
Yeah. And that's what your book did, is it educated people on what goes on. It exposed what goes on in factory farms because people really didn't know. Now we have so many more ways to know and so many more activists on the ground exposing it. What about the health implications? How did that factor in at all before you told your father at 21 that you weren't going to take over the business?
In my family, there was a lot of money and there was a lot of ice cream consumption, more than you can actually imagine. And there was a lot of ill health. My uncle, Bert Baskin, my dad's partner and brother-in-law, the co-founder of Baskin Robbins, died at the age of 54 of a heart attack. And he was a very, very big guy. He ate a lot of ice cream. And when he died, at this young age, 54, I asked my dad, do you think there could be a connection between the amount of ice cream that he would eat, which was prodigious, and his fatal heart attack? And my father said, no. His ticker just got tired and stopped working. And then he looked at me. And I wish I could convey the look, because it communicated, it said to me, the look said to me, not in words, don't you ever bring that up again. Don't you ever ask that question again. And it was as though, John Bradshaw, the psychologist, used to talk about there being no talk rules in families, taboo topics that just can't be discussed. It's just too painful for the family to go there. Sometimes it's around alcoholism or some other issue that's just painful in the family, and they don't have the skills or the ability to talk about it in a constructive way, so they avoid it. Well, I think in my family of origin, the fact that there might be a connection between ice cream and health or ice cream and disease was a taboo topic. Because my father, by that time, had manufactured and sold more ice cream than any human being who'd ever lived on this planet. He did not want to think that the family product was hurting anybody, much less that it might have harmed his brother-in-law, his partner, my uncle, Bert Baskin. But even as he was unwilling and unable to consider that possibility and was basically forbidding me to talk about it, I felt duty-bound to explore that question. I realized he couldn't. I couldn't ask him to be part of that conversation. That was asking too much of him. He wasn't able. But I could, and I needed to. And so I began to research. And what I discovered, amazingly, was that ice cream is not a health food. Now, that may seem like square one to most people, but not to me growing up in that family. And from there, I began to learn what actually was just being learned. Dean Ornish around that time came out with his studies, remarkable studies, showing that you could reverse end-stage heart disease, not just prevent it, although that's fabulous onto itself, but you could actually reverse it when it's developed and it's advanced through lifestyle measures, including and fundamentally a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet. And I thought, and that doesn't include ice cream. And whether you think sugar is the problem or saturated fat's the problem, ice cream is the problem because it's full of both, and that's basically what it is. It tastes great. It provides beautiful momentary pleasure, but at what cost? If you want to eat an ice cream cone once in a while, it's not going to kill you. But the more you eat, the more likely you are to have a heart attack, like killed my uncle, Bert Baskin. The more likely you are to have diabetes, which my father developed very severely in his life. And it's not just Baskin and Robbins. Ben Cohen, the founder and for many years co-owner of Ben & Jerry's, had a quintuple bypass procedure in his late 40s. Mm-hmm. The chickens come home to roost when you eat this way. And I'm not blaming or judging people for liking ice cream. But for me, I didn't want to manufacture and sell and make my living selling a product that was undermining people's health and harming animals and hurting the environment. That'd be the last thing I'd want to do.
Let me ask you a question about what we've pretty much established that you are a rare preteen in all of the questioning that was going on. What was it like growing up as the heir to this fortune when you were 13, 14, 15, 16, and those years when you were, kind of looking under the couch cover, right? Like looking under the tablecloth, asking questions, going so much deeper than, your father or uncle were willing to. How did that feel? What did that look like? What was that experience? And you basically are kind of poking holes in the family fortune.
Yeah, it was hard. One of the pieces that I remember most that I didn't like was that when people learned who my father was, they treated me differently. And I didn't change. They just learned this data point about him, not even about me, really. And yet it changed how they treated me completely. And I saw that, and I saw the assumptions that they made about me then became what they related to. The projection that they then had about me became more important to them than their experience of me, and I felt invisible. And so I didn't actually want people to know. And I was working at Baskin Robbins. My father was training me to take over the business, and his plan included that every summer vacation, every Christmas vacation, I'd work in the retail store, or work in the factory, or work in the warehouse, or work in merchandise, marketing, or work in different aspects of the business. He wanted me to learn it from the ground up, and because his plan was for me to take it over at some point. But what I noticed was I'm a kid, I'm working with adults, and they call me John, and they asked me to call them by their first name, and I don't want to do that. I want to call them Mr. Dunkel. That's the respectful way to treat an elder. And furthermore, they're vice presidents, they're executives. I'm working under them, and I'm learning from them. It just felt wrong. And the only reason that I knew that they wanted, in fact, one of them even told me, I said, I'd feel a lot more comfortable and I'd feel more respectful calling you Mr. Dunkel. And he said, no, I want you to call me Frank, because I know that one day you're going to be my boss, and I want to be on a first name basis with you. And I felt, I'm just a kid. This is not right. I don't know that I'm going to one day be his boss. He assumed it. My dad assumed it. But right now I'm a kid, and it just felt wrong. And I didn't want special treatment. I wanted to be known for who I was or who I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so I also saw something else, that rich kids, I've known a lot of them. I haven't known very many of them that I've liked or respected honestly. It's a very difficult thing to grow up rich. It's very isolating. You grow up with a very false, grandiose sense of entitlement. You grow up without empathy for how other people experience life. You grow up with, and these things are harmful to a person who wants to develop as a whole human being, who wants to connect with other people and their pain and their struggles and understand them. And so I felt actually constricted by this. And I was comfortable at the country clubs my parents belonged to, because that's where I spent time. I was comfortable flying first class, staying in 5-star hotels, because that's where we stayed when we traveled. That's how we traveled. I had no control over that. But I felt limited by that's where I was comfortable. And I wanted to be more comfortable around a whole lot more situations and people. And I saw how money is used to isolate in our culture. And I didn't want to be isolated. So for me, walking away from the money, yes, it made me less financially secure, to say the least, but it made me more emotionally secure because it made me more connected to who I am and more connected to my values and to my autonomy or self-determination. And it allowed me to slip out from being seen as the son of Baskin Robbins with all of the assumptions that people made about me because of that.
I want to actually, this isn't, because you brought up the feelings of how it is to be rich and then the gifts that living off the land and living on $500 a year or $500 a month gave you. I want to fast forward for a moment just to talk about what happened when you were 60, which I didn't know about until I was doing research for this show, and that you, in October of 2008, you got a phone call saying that your life savings were gone because of you had invested with Bernie Madoff. Well,
you're mostly right. A little bit, I want to correct that'll just a tiny bit. I never invested with Bernie Madoff. I didn't know who he was. I had never heard his name before that date that he was arrested. But what I had done was invested all of our money with a friend who was an attorney. He was EarthSave's attorney. He was on EarthSave's board, and he did all his work pro bono for EarthSave. Very generous guy, very wealthy guy. And he seemed to know his way around money and around legal issues very well. Very sophisticated guy. And around that time, what had happened is our son, Ocean, and his wife had given birth to two children, twins, who were born extremely prematurely and have had a great number of special needs. They are autistic, fully autistic. They have a lot of challenges, serious ones. And it was becoming very clear that these were lifelong challenges and that raising them was going to be very costly. It's going to take a lot of money. And Richard, my friend, the attorneys, came to us and said, look, I have an investment that you can make and I can take your money. It's where I have most of my money, he said. And you'll get something like 8% a year. And you can mortgage your property for like 4.5% or 5%, I think it was at the time. And so you'll make that difference as income, passive income, and it'll help raise these kids. So I trusted him, and I did that. I mortgaged our property to the max. I gave him the money, and then for several years was getting about 8%, paying about 5% on the mortgage. And so there was some income from that, and I appreciated it. And then he called me on December 8th, 2008, or December 11th, whatever it was, I forget. But with the news, he said, I've got terrible news. And I said, what, Richard? And my first thought was his health. Mm-hmm. Something had happened. And he said, well, Madoff's been arrested. And I didn't know who that meant nothing to me. And I said, who's that? What does that have to do with I don't understand. And he said, well, Bernie Madoff's been arrested, and I still didn't have a clue why he was telling me this or why this was important. And then he told me that's where all of our money was, and most of his money as well. He didn't know that it was a Ponzi scheme. He didn't know that it was a scam.
No, of course not. And I'm certainly, even if you had known it was Bernie Madoff, I mostly am sorry that happened, of course, but curious about how that was different than giving up the money at 21. Oh. A lot different, right? And
incredibly different. It's the difference between somebody fasting and somebody not eating because they're starving and don't have access to food or the money to pay for it. That's the difference. Yeah. It's all the difference in the world. When I left Baskin Robbins, I felt freer. Yes, I was poor financially. We did live very inexpensively. I found that to be an adventure. We were young. We didn't have children yet. We were capable of it. We found it kind of exciting. But when when I'd worked all these years as an author, written books that had sold, made money, had some savings that I'd put away for our retirement, owned a property, I felt good about where that money had come from, the books I had written and the talks I'd given. And to lose that money and completely our financial security at this point in time. I'm older. I'm not just starting out. I have a kid. In fact, I have 2 grandkids with massive special needs that I feel responsible for their care financially. And it's a blow. I mean, I felt desperate. I don't know how we're going to manage. I don't know how we're going to keep our property. I don't know how we're going to keep our family together. I don't know how we're going to take care of these boys, my grandkids. I was really frightened, and I've never been a fan of poverty. My wife and I chose to live very, very simply for a number of years. That was voluntary simplicity. Involuntary poverty is a scourge, and it ruins people's lives, and it destroys their ability to take care of themselves and their families. And it's a terrible thing. And I see the degree of wealth inequality that we have today in our culture to be a crime against humanity. And I think it's one of the terrible things that's contributing to the disintegration of our culture in many ways, is that we aren't in it together as much as we should be, as much as we truly are. But we're not honoring that reality, that we're interconnected with one another and interdependent on one another. We've taken a kind of every man for himself approach, and it's kind of dog eat dog. And the truth is, as maybe you both know, dogs don't eat dogs. Even dogs don't eat dogs.
I want to go back to when you stopped eating ice cream. You know, when that happened, and there's a quote that I just from you that I just absolutely cannot help but share with our audience. So if you will indulge, and then I want you to kind of talk about the space that you were in, and if this was right around the time that you decided to stop eating ice cream, or just shortly thereafter, maybe. So you said, I remember telling my father, "Look, Dad, we live in a different world now than the one in which you grew up. The environment is degrading badly under the impact of human activities. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is increasing, and the sense of common purpose and shared community is deteriorating. We live under a nuclear shadow, and at any moment the unspeakable could happen. Do you see that for me, feeling these things as deeply as I do, that inventing a 30-second flavor just wouldn't be an adequate response for my life?"
Yes, I did say that to him in pretty much those words. And this was when I was trying, a choice moment, a moment of truth had arisen in my life and his, in that my uncle, Bert Baskin, was dying. He'd had a series of heart attacks. He hadn't had his final fatal one yet, but the handwriting was on the wall, and he wasn't working anymore. And a big company, the United Fruit Company, had come to Baskin Robbins and wanted to buy the company for a lot of money. And my uncle wanted to sell it because he knew he was dying, and this way his family would be taken care of for the rest of their lives plus. And he would take some worry off of him. And it was attractive to my father as well, because the money was staggering, and my father would stake in control of the company. He would be the president and the chairman of the board and the largest stockholder and all that. Plus, so it was very attractive to him. But more than that, he wanted me to work with him and follow in his footsteps and work the company with him and then take it over. And he had felt at this point for maybe 2-3 years that I was pulling in a different direction. And so this choice moment came up, and he said to me, "Here's the offer from United Fruit. Bert wants to take it. It's attractive, but I won't take it if you think there's any chance you're going to come back and work with me. Because if I do take it, I'll lose control. I'll have a certain amount of control, but they will have the total control. And they say, oh, I can do everything. I'll still have the control, but I know how these things work. And if I'm no longer owning the company, but just a part owner, I won't be able to guarantee that you can come into and do work with me at any time. And I said to him, take the offer. I want you to sell the company. And he didn't like hearing that. Mm-mm. And so I said what you just said I said to him in the hope that it might help him understand and not feel so hurt that I was rejecting his life work. Mm-hmm. He didn't understand. He was very hurt. He was very angry at the time. And it caused a real rift between us, which I always regretted. In the long run, though, fast forward some years, he developed very severe diabetes. He was overweight, he had heart disease, he was very unhealthy, had very seriously high blood pressure. And his own cardiologist told him he should re-diet for New America, and he did. And he began making changes, and his health improved dramatically over the course of several years. And he lived, the prognosis at the time had been that he had only a couple of short years left, and they were not going to be healthy ones or happy ones. And instead, he lived 20 more years, and most of those were very healthy and happy. And I ended up being able to give him something, I think, more important than I would have if I had done the obvious thing and followed in his footsteps and invented a 30-second flavor. Instead, I was able to help him live a healthier life, and he ended up respecting me and my work in a way that I never would have thought possible.
But he eventually obviously came around and understood, because he got his life back. He got 20 years back.
Yeah.
Yes, he loved that. He never became an animal rights person. He never became an environmentalist. He still said he thought that God put forests on this earth for us to cut down and convert into shopping malls and ice cream stores. But his own health, his own body spoke to him. He was really ill. I mean, he was seriously ill. Mm-hmm. And then when he made the changes that his cardiologist said he should, that I had described in my books, he was flabbergasted, and he thought it was unbelievable that his son, who rejected his life work, his maverick son, his hippie son, that from his point of view, had written a book that in fact contributed dramatically and powerfully to his own healing, and he could see then to healings that were happening for a lot of other human beings. He became very sober about that, and very humble about that, and very respectful about that. And I love him for that. I appreciate that he could do that. That the man who had built this ice cream empire, who had become extremely wealthy by selling ice cream, could respect the choices of someone who walked away from all that and rejected all that and hurt him by doing that.
Well, speaking of living a long and healthy life, you wrote a book called Healthy at 100, which actually was, wasn't it the first book by a major publisher to be printed on 100% post-consumer?
Yes.
Recycled.
Post-consumer non-chlorine bleached paper. Is that right?
It was.
Congratulations. Yes.
Thank you. That was in the day when that was just starting to happen, and this was it was a big publisher with a big print run, and I had some clout in those days. I was a very successful author. They wanted me to go with them, and they wanted to publish the book, and so I could require some things as a author with that kind of stature in the industry at the time. And so I said, well, look, I would like the book printed on 100% recycled paper. And they said, we can do that. I said, well, I want it to be 100% post-consumer recycled paper. And they said, what's that? And they went to their suppliers. Nobody had it. They needed to get it in the quantities and in the, all that they needed. And I said, non-chlorine bleached. And they were like tearing their hair out, but they did it.
That's
and
great.
Now it's become a commonplace in the industry, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But that was the first one, and I used the clout I had to kind of force them to do it, because it cost them more.
Yes.
At that time the paper was more costly.
Yeah.
And,
but they knew the book was going to be successful, so it was
worth it.
It was worth
they
it.
did it, and I reduced my royalty structure a little bit to part of that bargaining process. because I felt so strongly about it. And I mean, I was doing fine. I was being paid quite well. I wasn't suffering in any sense. And that way I was able to initiate a process in the industry, in the publishing industry, that's important and has grown since, thankfully, a lot.
It's important that you noted it's post-consumer. It's hard to kind of wrap your head, but post-consumer means that it's recycled from the recycling bin as opposed to scrap paper on the floor of the paper company, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
We're not contributing to a landfill, in other words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. So healthy at 100. Can you give us some tips on how to be healthy at 100 or to 100?
Well, yeah. The first one is that food's really important. That what you eat is really going to have an impact, and particularly over time. If you're eating a whole foods, plant-strong, plant-based diet, that means not a lot of or no processed foods. It means not a lot of or no animal products. It means a lot of vegetables. It means a lot of fruits and seeds and nuts and legumes and whole grains if they agree with you. It means basing your diet around plant foods from nature, not packaged, processed versions of those foods, but as close to nature as possible. You will live statistically 11 years longer, but more importantly than that, that's your lifespan. Your health span will be 15 years longer. Your final years, your years of your elderhood will be more vital and vibrant. Your rate of cognitive impairment will be vastly lower. Your risk of Alzheimer's disease in your older years will be vastly lower. Your risk of getting heart disease and cancer and diabetes and being overweight will be vastly lower. Your quality of life will be vastly higher. And food is that powerful. And of course, other lifestyle measures are important. Obviously, don't smoke. Obviously, don't drink alcohol to excess. Obviously, exercise, and exercise is actually amazing. And people say, well, what form of exercise is best? I always say, whatever one you'll do, whatever one you like.
Say too.
Because it's good. Move, enjoy, get yourself breathing, your energy flowing. And we're designed to move. And whatever you like to do, hike, run, cycle, work out at the gym, dance, anything. If it's moving, it's good. And there's also stress reduction practices, things like yoga, things like meditation, things like walking in nature and being quiet in nature. There's all kinds of ways that we can bring our stress levels down and manage our stress levels, and that's important too. So these are the lifestyle components, but the diet is actually the most important of them all. And of course, you don't want to live an unhealthy life otherwise while trying to get healthy through only diet, but food choices really matter. And I think it's really wonderful. And Alexandra and Dotsie, I really want to appreciate you, because this is a fact that you always bring, that when you shift from dairy products to plant milks and plant-based products, instead, you get healthier, there's less animal suffering, there's less water pollution and air pollution, and there's less degradation of the planetary life support systems. There's more species left alive instead of being extinguished. We're contributing far less to climate change. There are so many goods, so many benefits that accrue to us in terms of our own health and to the planet and to our hearts and our connections with each other. It's a powerful, powerful step to take. And the earlier you start, the better, but it's never too late. You can always get advantages and benefits from doing it, making these shifts.
So, as your dad proved, actually, but
yeah, so he's a good example.
Do people ever ask you, because Baskin Robbins now has some vegan flavors, do you eat vegan ice cream? Because I really love vegan ice cream myself. So I know you also created Jamocha almond fudge, right? If they veganize that, they should. That should be the first one they veganized.
Well, I agree with you about that. Yes, I did invent a number of flavors, including that one. And for a while, I thought that was going to be on my tombstone. That's what I had done.
It was a big hit. One of my faves.
I didn't want that, really.
No, knowing you, no, that would not have been good on your
Now we can have the vegan flavor, though.
No. But it does provide a lot of momentary pleasure for people. And if we can provide that pleasure in a way that doesn't undermine their health and doesn't harm the animals, and a vegan form of ice cream, be it from Baskin Robbins or there's lots of non-dairy manufacturers of non-dairy frozen desserts that are great. The Baskin Robbins vegan flavors that have come out, I know all about them. I know the formulas. They're very sweet. They're oversweet because they're designed to appeal to the taste buds of the people who shop at Baskin Robbins. And that's not those people's taste buds have been hijacked by the amount of sugar that they're eating. So they only taste things when they're really intensely sweet. And that's one of the problems with those foods is they do hijack your taste buds, and they're so intense, the flavors. And this is true also about ultra processed foods that have so much salt in them and so much added fats and flavorings, added flavors. They deliver, they're called hyper palatable. They deliver so much intense flavor that they actually diminish your ability to enjoy an apple, to enjoy a banana, to enjoy, certainly to enjoy broccoli.
Dairy sugars are intense. The D-galactose and the NEU5GC, they're intense and they are lethal, literally.
Yes.
Yep.
So if you want to eat a vegan or a non-dairy frozen dessert once in a while, I'm certainly not going to stop you. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get the healthiest versions that there are. But the problem with them isn't so much, if it's occasional, isn't so much the impact on your health of just consuming that small amount of saturated fat or whatever it is. The sugar. It's the impact on your ability to appreciate and enjoy subtler things.
Which is amazing because you said you ate so much ice cream as a kid that do you have sugar? Can it send you right back to wanting?
I ate so much ice cream as a kid, I couldn't taste anything else. I found Coca-Cola not sweet enough as a kid. I mean, I just ate, and I was a sick kid as a result. And honestly, one of the joys for me now, I'm 72, and I'm breaking records at the gym. I'm hiking as much as I want.
You look great. I saw a picture of you online. I saw that six-pack.
Yes. Me too. We stalked you online.
Everybody go check out John Robbins without a shirt on. It's pretty hot.
Well, we got it quiet. We did it. You can't speak.
You have embarrassed me. You have.
Now everyone's gonna go.
It's good marketing for whole food plant-based.
Exactly.
Very good marketing.
Exactly.
What do people want to know about you? What is your regimen or workout routine? So you said hiking, and you like the gym, and you like to stay strong, lift weights. What else?
I love to hike.
Yeah,
I love to hike in the mountains, and I happen to live in a place where I can hike, eat pretty easily. There's a lot of good hikes nearby, and I go on them a lot. I love being out in the wilderness. I do. I find cities to be a bit oppressive the longer I'm in them. And I love being out in the wilderness. I actually breathe differently, and I love challenging my body. Now, I don't challenge it quite the way I did when I was younger. I did become a marathon runner and a triathlete, and not at the level that you two are, but I did do, for me, a lot. And I don't do that anymore. I could, but I don't. My knees don't like it, the marathons. They don't like running downhill at all. So now what I do is I hike and I run up the hills. I run up the mountains, and I hike I walk down. I hike down, and I love running up hills. It just challenges me. It doesn't hurt my knees at all. And cardiovascular, it's thrilling. And so I do that. And then I love working out at the gym. I work out with my son. He's 46. I'm 72. I'm still actually ahead of him in those things. I realize that is that's only going to last for so long. He's a competitive kid, but I'm not going to make it easy for him. So to beat me. So we have a lot of fun and cheering each other on. And that's something actually I wish more men had, is closer father-son connections. And around sports, around athletics, around doing things physically that are fun and healthy. We do it at the gym. We ran marathons together. We did a lot of running together, and we've done a lot of hiking together. And it's very bonding, and it's very beautiful, and it's healthy.
Yeah, I share that hiking love with my parents too, who are your age, and I am your son's exact age.
Yeah.
And they went whole food, plant-based, like in their late 60s. And no medications or anything. Dad got off his cholesterol medication, and he looks as good as you do, I might say. But we're not going to embarrass you anymore. And I'm not going to talk about my dad's six-pack. We're just going to leave it.
Oh, you guys are funny.
Well, he's got to be inspired by you.
I hope so. I think they just got
sure.
tired of me, I think is what actually happened. Tired of me running my mouth, and they'd heard enough and said, this is probably
if you can't beat them, join them.
Yep, that's what happened there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, John, thanks for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. It's been
my
great.
pleasure. Yes. Well, I just want to appreciate both of you for your lives. I mean, the values that you live by, the messages that you bring, the example that you set, each of you is inspiring.
Well, you've been our inspiration, John.
You paved the way, my friend.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're just like walking in your footsteps.
That's right.
That's exactly
right.
what's taking place.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
John.
This has been so much fun and
Thank you.
really informative, but lots of fun too. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switch4good.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.